Hey there guys, thanks for tuning in. In this video, we're gonna go over what types of meat you wanna pick for making sausage, how to make a meat selection for the different types of sausage you're making, and kind of what each cut is about, the different things you hear, and why they're good in sausage making. So hang in for that. Thanks for clicking on. If there's anything I missed, you wanna know, any other video suggestions coming up in the future, leave me a comment below, and we'll consider them all for different future videos. Hey there guys, so as I mentioned, we'll just go over how to pick the types of meat for sausage, what the types are, and kind of what the pros and cons to each cut is. We'll start with kind of the common ones, like in most of the how to do it yourself sausage videos, you know, how to make Italian sausage, Most of these guys kind of just tell you, ask your local butcher and he'll hook you up with the right stuff. But you know, if I can get you guys the information, you guys can go out to whatever grocery store and Costco's, whatever, and pick the stuff up fairly cheap for yourself and start making your own sausage and just have the knowledge of why you're picking what you're picking. So one of the most common ones that I hear these how-to guys suggest is the pork butt. The pork butt's a nice cut because it's got a little bit of connective tissue, which is good for the sausage making. It's got a lean to fat ratio of kind of 80% lean, 20% fat, plus or minus kind of 5%, which makes a really nice sausage, particularly when you're doing like a fresh frying sausage. It kind of, that fat is necessary. It gives you the sausage kind of the juicy texture that you're looking for. So we have some of those cuts over here. I got them all for you. And this is the pork butt. This is kind of what you'll be looking at. See that nice fat cap? You've probably seen it if you watch some pulled pork videos. And it comes off of just kind of underneath, well, the shoulder blade, it lays right in here. This is a boneless pork butt, a boneless pork shoulder, might be another name for it, depending where you're from. And basically, on the pig, it's right on the shoulder. So like I said, the more, I guess I didn't say, but the more an animal uses its muscle, the more connective tissue it has, which really translates to flavor. Flavor, connective tissues kind of go hand in hand. But yeah, so it's got a nice fat cap, and inside here there's some nice lean meat. The shoulder's been removed for us on this one already. You can find these at Costco's, wholesale foods, stuff like that. And these guys, so we'll just give you a little cross section look on this guy. So you open it up, there's your pork butt. See all this nice intermuscular fat? That's the nice fat you're looking for. So there's kind of a couple different types of fat when you're selecting your meat you want to kind of know about. And the two kinds that go pretty good with, or really good with sausage, is the subcutaneous fat, which is this fat here on the outside, and intermuscular fat, which is this stuff here on the inside. This is, you get that intermuscular and subcutaneous fat off a nice finished animal. The fat you don't really want to be using is body cavity fat, just because it has a lower melting point, and you'll find it makes the pan oily if you're making a fresh sausage, or if you're smoking a sausage. You'll have a little bit of difficulty with the fat rendering out. So the two types of fat you want and are really prevalent in the pork butt is the sub-Q fat and the intermuscular fat. And this guy, he's kind of the champion of the sausage making world because he's got the perfect ratio. You don't have to add any lean, you don't have to add any fat. So because he's got about that 20, 25, depending on how fat the pig is, maybe 30% fat, 70% lean, but it's kind of about 25, 75. So that's the pork butt. Beautiful piece of meat for making beautiful sausage. And from here, you would just cube it up into whatever kind of size you need for your grinder. And in future videos, we'll kind of go over how-tos of grinders and how you can prepare your meat best to work most efficiently in your grinder. So that's the pork butt. That's probably the most common. And of course, that's pork. So we'll move on to a beef one here, which is called the chuck. Like lots of these guys on how to make a perfect burger, they say, well, you need chuck meat. Or if you're making a beef sausage, a fresh frying beef breakfast sausage, lots of these guys will say, ask your butcher for some chuck. Yeah, get them to grind you some chuck. Well, this muscle here, I don't see a ton in the grocery stores and stuff like that. So you might have to go to a higher end butcher store, have someone order it in for you or something like that. But this is called the chuck roll. And it has been deboned just kind of like that pork shoulder. And it actually comes off the same spot that that pork shoulder came off, but off of beef, obviously. So big, beautiful piece. And again, it's, you know, up here, the animal uses it, so it's got some connective tissue, which equals flavor. And this guy isn't quite obviously as fat as that pork butt. He's kind of been trimmed down because that shoulder blade, I think, comes out of right there, actually. So on this guy, it's kind of the same thing as the pork butt. Sometimes you'll have to look for a little bit of bone skin on these from where they pull the shoulder blade off in the plants. So they'll have it hang and they'll rip it right off, that shoulder blade muscle, and you'll end up with a little bit of what's called like a bone skin on here. So when you're picking this guy out, you'll have to maybe look. This guy doesn't actually have too much. That's just like a little bit right there. If you can, not really though. But that's something you want to look for. You want to trim it off. For the most part, you don't have to do any trimming on the pork butt. Other than that bit of bone skin, you really don't have to do too much trimming on this beef chuck. You know, if you really want, if you got a kind of a little bit smaller grinder, you can take some of this silver off. If you guys can see that, there's a little bit of silver on there, and you can take that off. Look, get that up. Brah, it's heavy. Anyways, you can cut that off with a little boning knife if you really wanted. Help your grinder chew it up a little quicker, kind of thing. A little bit of that stiff. But for the most part, they're good to go too. It's just like that pork shoulder. Pristine cut for making sausage, making ground beef, burgers, whatever. And it's actually not quite as fat as looking at that pork shoulder, that pork butt, but it's still got that really nice intermuscular marbling. And same goes with beef as for pork. You want that subcutaneous fat and intermuscular fat, and you kind of want to stay away from the body cavity fat because it has that lower melting point and it'll run out. So this is the beef chuck, a little bit of connective tissue right up here, pretty much good to go for making sausage. This guy you can maybe get away with adding a little bit of fat, but yeah, it's got that nice intermuscular fat. It's a beautiful piece for making sausage. It's also a nice piece for smoking on the barbecue and braising and stuff like that, but for the most part, we'll stick to sausage info. Sometimes there is little pieces in here of like really heavy fat, but this guy's quite nice. Let's have a look here, see if I can find you one. But no, that's just a beautiful ratio for lean ground and sausage making. You can almost add a whisker of fat to this guy. Okay, so that's our beef chuck. One more kind of whole muscle before we kind of change up is the pork picnic. Now guys talk about using the pork shoulder, like most predominantly 90% of the time I watch these videos on YouTube, they say use that pork shoulder trimmings, da 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 da. But this guy is underutilized. I don't hear anyone talk about this. This is the pork picnic, and it actually comes off the commercial pork shoulder. So the commercial pork shoulder consists of the picnic, which is a little bit further down the arm. It's kind of like what would be the cross rib area and stuff on a beef. And it's a little bit leaner, does have a little bit more connective tissue. But if this is the pork butt here, it's higher up on the shoulder. As you go down, you get into the picnic. And I think these guys are great because, you know, they're usually a couple, like a couple dollars cheaper a kilogram or a couple dollars cheaper a pound. So you can get them for less, and they still make really, really nice sausage. The arm bone, this one's a boneless one again. So the arm bone of the pig kind of sits in there. And so in the plant, they take this, they debone it. You do have to watch out for a little bit of bone chips and stuff in there because those guys are using really sharp knives and they'll just knock off little chips. So you just gotta trim that little bit out on this cut. But other than that, this one it's a really nice one for making sausage as well. It's got that nice subcutaneous fat, but it is a little bit leaner. You're not gonna see that really heavy intermuscular marbling that you've seen on the pork shoulder there. Like, look at this guy. He is so lean in there. Beautiful though, right? So if you want a little bit leaner sausage, or say you've been saving your fats, you've been trimming loins, you've been piling that stuff up off smoking briskets or something like that, you can always add just a little bit of that into this, and you're kind of getting meat for cheaper. That's the best part about this pork picnic, as far as I'm concerned. It's nice lean meat for pretty cheap, a little bit more connective tissue, but when you're running it through a grinder, you won't even know. So pork picnic is also a wicked good alternative to a pork butt if you don't have pork butts. So those are kind of the whole muscle ones that I hear guys talk about most in these sausage making videos. Ones that are fairly common. I think you probably pick up any of those at a wholesale grocery store. I know you can pick the pork butts up and picnics up at Costco. I'm not sure about the chucks. You might have to order those in, but they're pretty common. So those are the whole muscle cuts. Now, sometimes you hear guys, if they're not talking about using trim, using using chucks, using pork shoulders, they're talking about using trim. Go ask your butcher for some trim. Those were kind of the higher quality cuts. If you want to make a higher quality sausage, you're using whole muscles, you know exactly what's going in. You can see it, right? But if you're picking up trim from the butcher, it tends to be kind of the lower end cuts that don't get cooked, right? It's like the prime ribs, the strip loins, the tenderloins, the shoulders and chucks. They always sell, right? But the stuff that doesn't sell, that's kind of what gets piled up into trim. So right here, I bought some 80/20 spec pork trim, and you can see here, like this here, it's kind of tough to tell, but that's a little bit of a pork shank. And the pork shank is the pork leg muscle, and since the animal is using that to walk all the time, it's got really high levels of connective tissue, which isn't a big deal, but you just want to make sure you don't end up with too much collagen or too many high connective tissue cuts in your sauces, because it does affect the texture and the flavor at the end. Too much collagen, you can see it in the end. So yeah, there's a little shank. This is some kind of, like I said, it's kind of lower end stuff you don't cook as much. This is some diaphragm meat, which kind of sounds gross, but it's still fine. There's lean meat in there. But this is that body cavity fat there. You can see it's quite crumbly. It's not very hard compared to, I can just pull it off of here, compared to that nice subcutaneous and body cavity fat I was talking about. And yeah, so you can, and some of these aren't bad. This looks like it's a chunk off the belly where they'd make bacon and stuff when they're squaring up bellies. And it's kind of higher contamination areas that get trimmed off. You might have to cut it up a bit. But this is kind of what they're talking about when you get trim. So con is, it's not as high quality. You have to maybe do a little bit of trimming in there. If you have a small grinder, you might have a tough time getting some of this diaphragm meat. Like here's a little bit more of that body cavity fat you don't really want. So cons, that's kind of the cons. It's not as high quality. It's still going to make pretty good sausage though. That's what most sausage is actually made out of. The do-it-yourself homemade guys, they're using these, and it's really delicious. This is going to make good sausage still. But and then the pro of it is it's the cheapest. This is the cheapest route here. It's a couple bucks a pound. If you want to make breakfast sausages, fresh frying sausages, this is totally a good way to go. Yeah, so that's a pork option. Beef option, it's kind of the same thing. This guy here, I got an 85/15, so this is lean beef trim here. Just kind of some straight fat thrown in with some meat. For the most part, when you get beef trim, it's going to be the same cuts as off the pork. It's off the midline trimmings, it's the shanks, it's where they're squaring cuts up. I actually see they threw me in a chunk of ribeye. I might just peel that out and stir fry that bad boy. But this, same thing. Same things as the pork trim. Pros, it's cheaper by quite a bit. It's still going to make pretty nice sausage. Cons, you got a little bit more connective tissue. The cuts aren't as high quality. You might not know exactly what cuts are going in there, but it's still going to make pretty good sausage. So that's the beef trim. And for all this stuff, you're going to need a grinder. And in future videos, we're going to go over, like I mentioned earlier, how to optimize kind of the meat to go through your grinder best and how to run a grinder and so on and so forth. But if you don't have a grinder, or you want to get into making sausage and maybe you don't want to buy a grinder, like I haven't bought one in a long time, but they're probably like $400 for a pretty small one to $1,000 for a good one, sort of thing. So it's a little bit to get into. And then you can use your grinder as a stuffer too. But if you don't want to, I always thought this would be a good idea. You can just buy a stuffer. You can find used ones for pretty cheap, or new ones for, you know, like under $500, and you'd be making your own sausage, you know, next day. Is you can pick these up at Costco, wholesale stores and stuff. These are just ground tubes. So is this a 10 pound or 5 pound? 5 or 10 pound ground beef tube. And it's really just this ground up for you. So it's exactly 15, what did I buy, lean? Yeah, lean. So it's exactly 15%. All you do is you just open this up, dump it into your mixing bowl, start mixing, and you can fill it in your stuffer and start stuffing sausage. But with this one, in the plants, you're getting 10% of this, so this much of this is mechanically separated meat. So that means they basically take it. There's a good Jamie Oliver video on, maybe I'll link it on. Actually, he's kind of a little bit dramatic about it. But but basically they take it and they put it in like if you've ever seen one of those big concrete mixers where they mix the concrete right before they pour the sidewalk, they basically throw meat into one of those, and as it goes down, it gets pushed against this edge and it gets rubbed and it gets grinded out, and they take all the trim, all the stuff that's not meat, not like, you know, too much connective tissue stuff like this, but worse. I shouldn't say worse, it's not scary, it's just connective tissue stuff. And then basically they rub out all the protein, and they can ammonia wash that and put it back in at 10%. So 10% of that is this. So yeah, you can pick those up any store. They make it in beef and they make it in pork. So you can just pick it up, cut it, season it with your favorite seasonings. We'll go over a couple of how to formulate recipe videos in the future. But yeah, pick these up, you're good to go. Same thing, this is a lean pork, 15% fat, 85% lean. Beautiful for making sausage. Just looking to make delicious sausage. This is gonna make delicious sausage. I'm gonna show you how to make this into delicious sausage. All of it. So anyways, guys, hopefully that kind of helps you understand what these guys are talking about when they say chuck, shoulder, trim, so on and so forth. If you like the video, let me know. Give it a thumbs up. If there's anything I can do better, please leave me a comment below. If there's future video ideas, put them down below. I'll be sure to read them. Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.